Hello, my name is Aiden Babbitt, and you may not know me. However, I found my mic stand. Not really found it, just finally got around to putting it up. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep it this way, because there's something to having the microphone in your hand, but now I've got two hands coming at you. Having two hands definitely has its perks, because if I didn't have two hands available, I wouldn't be able to do this. Now, somewhere in the Black Mountain Hills of Dakota, there lived a young boy named Rocky Raccoon. And one day, his woman ran off with another guy. Hit young Rocky in the eye. Rocky didn't like that. He said, I'm gonna get that boy. So one day, he walked into town and booked himself a room at the local saloon. Now, Rocky Raccoon checked into his room, only to find Gideon's Bible. Rocky had come. Origami. It's fun, right? I mean, it is. We all liked origami. At least I think. I definitely had an origami phase, where you would build stupid things like these paper hats. I had one, and it happened in like my elementary school to like middle school. I really didn't do any origami in high school. It started sort of like I distinctly remember in elementary school. Well, there goes my other hat. That's fine. I was gonna throw it anyway as a bit, but now it's just here. You know what? Boom. No second take. Let's do this shit. Anyway, I remember distinctly in elementary school in art class with my hot art teacher. I forget what her name was, but I'm sorry if she watches this. I was like, what? Like, not even 10? No, I would have been 10. Who knows? Anyway, I remember being in her art class and we did an origami day where she taught us all how to make those origami paper frogs. And ever like for years after that, origami was like a steady part of school life. I distinctly remember like being in math class or like in English class and like as something to do to like keep your hands busy, you'd start folding paper. And I don't even remember where I learned origami or where any of us learned origami. It was just something it's not something we figured out. We clearly were taught or looked up. I do remember having an origami set, but like we'll get to that later. And anyway, I remember like during lunch and stuff or like after school, you would like play with the origami creations. I remember me and my friends would see how small we could fold a paper frog because the smaller they were, the further they jumped. And if you got to use cardstock, then your frogs were going to go flying. We would make these all the time. Another thing we made all the time were these. We called them cootie catchers or like fortune tellers. And I also remember that no one really knew how fortunes worked because you would do the thing where you would be like, oh, like, pick a number, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick a color, and then it's like, purple, Purple. And then it's like, all right, then pick a triangle, and then you'd like read the fortune, and then you'd open it up and like read what was under there, and most times it was complete and utter nonsense. I remember it was just like someone likes you, or like you get $1 million, or like like those were like the three big ones, and none of those are fortunes. That was just statements that weren't true, but that's what happens when you're a small idiot child. Um, anyway, so I've spent my afternoon and evening um, doing origami. Some eagle-eyed viewers might notice that I have an origami ring on my left ring finger. And that would be because I am married, actually. Married to Making Dat Paper. And because I'm so iced out, I thought it would be appropriate for me to do a. I'm not a rapper, so I'm not going to rap, but I would like to do a dramatic reading of a song I found. I'm going to be real honest here. I looked up songs that have ice in the lyrics. And I was directed to a Lil Wayne verse from the song aptly named Ice by Kelly Rowland featuring Lil Wayne. So I'm just going to do sort of a dramatic reading, if you don't mind. uh, Ice, ice, baby. Shake that ass just like dice, baby. You hot, and I'm Tunchi. I beat the cat. Animal cruelty. I'm colder than your man. He should be your ex. Now throw that ass back like we playing pitch and catch. In parentheses, fucking right. And all you hear is what's my name, it's YOLO. Sweet tooth roll to see if you are what you eat. I'm so pussy. I'm skating on thin ice. I put it in our windpipe. Hey, wait a minute. This song isn't about jewelry. This song is about. Now, when you think about the history of origami, I'm going to assume you probably think of Japan. And you would be correct. I mean, origami is Japanese for folding and paper. And so to think about Japan would, be correct. But I'm willing to bet the origami you're thinking of is not just of Japanese descent and is in fact actually a combination of Japanese and European paper folding. Um, Historians have been able to recognize distinct paper folding a long ways back in China, Japan, and Europe. In China, they would fold like paper effigies and burn them at funerals. In Japan, origami was sort of used as like a greeting card. It would be like attached with gifts. And in Europe, it was actually akin to napkin folding. However, there was a German man. His name was Friedrich Froebels, who created something called the kindergarten system, which used those basic elements of napkin folding and sort of transferred it to paper folding. And when Japan opened its borders in 1860, one of the things that was brought over was Froebel's kindergarten method. And that is probably what we know most today. Their sort of combination on that is now what makes up modern origami. And I want to go back to what I said earlier about how like I used to have an origami kit, and that's probably where I learned most of my origami, like this small crane. I mean, this is supposed to be a butterfly, but it really doesn't look like anything. Ninja Star I definitely learned on YouTube. There's no way that was in my origami book. However, that origami book, it came with origami paper, which are those small dual-colored squares. It's the thin paper with a color on one side and a color on the other in a small square. That base that you build from is that kindergarten system, that start. And the origami or how origami is sort of understood today is that there are like no cuts, no glue, no tape. It's just folding. There are different types of origami. Sort of instead of like I just said, no cuts, no glue, no tape, just folding. There's something called kirigami, which is also originated in Japan and was more akin to sort of the furthest recorded origami, in which it did use different bases instead of like not just a square, a different shape, and a shape that may have had cuts in it to sort of help facilitate the creation. So kirigami is one type of origami. There's also action origami, which is origami that sort of moves. Like I'm sure you've seen one where if you pull like the head and tail of a bird, the wings flap. I've also made one up here that is not quite like, probably not traditional origami, but it's something that when folded can be opened repeatedly. I used to make these all the time, and my teachers would get mad at me. Anyway, there's also something called modular origami, which is something like the Ninja Star, which is you build separate pieces and then put those pieces together. That's modular origami. Then there's something called wet folding origami, and wet folding origami was created by Akira Yoshizawa. And what wet folding origami is, it's sort of akin to paper mache, but not quite. It's using a special kind of origami paper, or an origami paper that has been treated with something called methyl cellulose, which when wet allows you to mold the paper into something more round, something more subtle, not something as rigid and pointy as the origami you see here, but instead much more elegant. And then when it hardens, it becomes rough and rigid, sort of like paper, like more akin to paper, or construction paper rather. And so that's how you would create more rounded creations, and it's used a lot when making sort of origami sculptures of like animals. And it's really cool. Then there's Pure Land origami, which in certain origami circles is known as pussy shit. Finally, the hardcore origami is called origami tessellations. And I don't even know how to describe this, so I'm just going to show a couple pictures. Why? If you thought the phrase origami tessellations was wild, buckle up for this next one. There is a good amount of friction when it comes to ethics and copyright in origami, which is a funny sentence. Not in the traditional haha funny, but in the like, what the actual fuck? What are ethics doing in origami? And it deals more with copyright and the ethics of sort of like intellectual theft, because there's a debate going on, well, not really going on, about whether or not you can copyright origami, or like an origami creation. There was a lawsuit back in 2012 between an origamist and I believe TBS, because TBS had published a set of origami instructions, and this origamist sued them, claiming that they were his instructions. However, he lost because Japanese court decided that you can't copyright origami instructions because the instructions, the folding instructions, are an idea. They are a means to an end to a creation. And now, in origami creation, an original origami creation created by an artist is art, and therefore can be intellectual property and protected under copyright. But the instructions to fold one of those can be recreated with no copyrighted punishment, because that is just an idea, and you can't copyright an idea, if that makes sense. It's really weird and kind of confusing, but you know, that's origami for you. Origami is confusing paper folding, and there are confusing stance about morals and ethics within the origami community, which is, again, really funny and not a sentence I thought I'd ever say in my life. If you couldn't tell, this video is essentially nothing, sort of like all my videos, where it's just me talking for an extended period of time because, I don't know, I'm bored and I want to. So there's no real end to this video. I'll actually show you something. I've got a notebook here. It says origami in it. And it's a very loose script. It's just sort of like an outline of like what to talk about. We just finished the ethics and copyrights of origami. And then for the last bullet, if you can't read it, says, I don't know. Figure it out, loser. Here I am figuring it out. Oh, I should, if you're wondering why I'm dressed like an adult, in a, in a belt and khakis and a button down with nice shoes, I paid bills today, which is wild. Because I still don't feel like adult enough to do that. Like taxes scare me still. But here I am, living on my own, going to work, paying bills. But if you had any doubt that I'm still very, very much a child, my socks have wolves on them. Anyway, if you've watched it this far, thanks. I'll see you soon.